Right now, as we talk, heads of states, CXOs, experts, and champions of climate change are discussing ways to deal with perhaps one of the greatest crises of our times, the climate crisis. The 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, better known as COP27, is taking place right now in Egypt. The event started on November 6th and will continue till 18th. Hello and welcome to Moneycontrol. I'm Rachita Prasad, and joining me today live from Egypt is Mr. Sumant Sinha, founder and chairman ReNew Power. This is his third time at the COP, and he's going to share with us insights from the ground zero. Welcome to the show, Mr. Sinha. Glad to
Thank
have you
you.
here.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Mrs. Sinha, this is the third time you're attending COP, and this particular COP comes at a very interesting time. I mean, we are in the middle of an energy crisis like never before. Help me understand what's the mood like on the ground and what are the discussions looking like, not just on the stage, but on the sidelines?
Yeah, actually, to be honest, sidelines is really where people like us spend more of our time because obviously, it's the government folks that get involved with the main negotiations that happen between the countries. I would say that what's happening currently is that there are many things that are buffeting the global energy systems. Climate, of course, was one of the most important things that was there. But in addition to that, of course, now with the war in Europe, the whole issue of energy security is also becoming front and center. But one of the very heartening things that I'm finding this time is that corporates from around the world are much more significant participants at COP. And of course, while we don't get involved in the main negotiations, there are lots of discussions that happen on the sidelines and the margins and in various panel discussions that are actually very, very useful because ultimately, I think what people have to recognize is that while governments have to set policy and make mandates, eventually it's the corporate sector that has to carry it out. And therefore, for the corporate sector to be getting together as well is very critical because it's important for us to know what's happening on the user industry side, what are different carbon emitters who are corporates like steel industry, cement industries, what are they thinking, what are they doing, how can we help them in that process. So all of those discussions happen on the sidelines as well. So I think that participation of the corporate sector, which is increasing actually at the COPs, at least that I've been at, is I think a very heartening and welcome addition to the whole COP framework. It is not formalized yet, but I would hope that in future COPs, the organizers would formalize, I think, in a deeper sense, the participation of corporates as well. Now, in terms of the general mood, however, I think there is a general sense that we're not doing enough on climate as a world, that there is a lot of debate about whether 1.5 degrees is already baked in and whether it's even sensible to try to keep 1.5 degrees alive or whether we should just now give up the ghost on that one and try to start looking at a new target like 2 degrees centigrade or something like that. So there's a bit of despondency around that issue. And the third thing I would say is the fact that this whole issue of energy security now is becoming more critical in countries as they think about supply chains, as they think about production in their own countries. How does the US new act of the IRA impact global renewable energy and supply chain and so on. So there are lots of these imponderables that are out there that are creating for a slightly more uncertain environment. And of course, behind all of that, the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates, so that is causing its own mayhem. So it's a bit of an uncertain environment from that standpoint. And while the Egyptian government is saying that this is a COP for implementation, it's not immediately clear as to what exactly that means beyond getting more financing lined up.
It's interesting, that you say that, there is a lot of discussion happening on the sidelines, but it all boils down to, the countries taking the initiative. And right now, of course, the biggest concern is energy security. One of the things we have noticed in the last 1 year is that the energy market has been very volatile, and of course, with Russia invading Ukraine, one of the things that has happened is there is renewed interest towards coal. I mean, countries across Europe are either, restarting some of their thermal power plants or stacking up coal for future use. Given that background, do you feel there is, I mean, is this regressive in to what was happening in the clean energy space? I mean, is it a step back? Is it a setback for clean energy in general when the targets are already, a big challenge?
So I won't say it's a setback for clean energy, but I would say it's a setback for global climate change mitigation efforts. Um, Emissions have risen by 6% last year when we're actually supposed to be bending the trajectory downwards. And every year that we continue to have more emissions, it becomes harder and harder. The task becomes more and more onerous. Um, so I think that any enhanced use of fossil fuels is, of course, not great for the environment, for climate change, and to that extent, it should be prevented. Having said that, European countries currently are totally scrambling because they have winter setting in. This year, it seems that they seem to have adequate gas in their reserves, but next year apparently is going to be a much tougher year for them. And so they are looking for anything that they can get to bolster their energy supplies. And unfortunately, coal is therefore enjoying a bit of a renaissance as a result of that.
Right.
So I think that's really not good news, but it is what it is. I think, clean energy, we have to just redouble the efforts on clean energy. The only problem is there are many implementation problems on clean energy, and those have to be sorted out relatively rapidly as well. And that is an area where I think more governments need to do whatever they can.
So the other thing that has happened in the COP meets over the last few years is that India has emerged as a strong voice. I mean, last year the whole focus on phasing down coal and not phasing out coal that India pushed. I mean, that seems to be the flavor of the season now, given how things have changed. And of course, like you said, it is a big concern. But the voice that India has become in COP, how is that being seen this year, especially in the context of, I mean, earlier India made a statement that the $100 billion commitment that developed nations have made is rather minuscule given the scale of the problem. And I mean, really not much has happened on that front. So strong statements coming in from India. How is India being viewed as at this platform? And for you, what is your assessment of India's stance at COP27 this time?
Yeah, I think, look, India is a very big country. India is the third or fourth largest carbon emitter in the world. Our development timeline is just starting. And so as we look forward, India will become an even more significant, actor in the whole carbon emission space. The decisions that India takes from now on are going to be fundamental to whether we're able to meet the carbon emissions aspirations of the world or not. Um, I think that, look, India is already doing a lot. I think more than what the Western world could have expected, over the last few years, in terms of the commitments that we've made to shift to renewable energy, in terms of now the thrust towards things like green hydrogen and so on as well, in terms of the voice that we've become in global climate change conversations. So I think India has actually taken a very strong leadership position, born out of our own actions and our own steps. And I think that really strengthens India's position and strengthens India's voice. Now, how can India use that voice? I think number one, we can fight for more climate finance. That's something that we've been arguing for a long period of time. We should continue to argue for that. Today, $100 billion is much smaller than what is required. We
Right.
require potentially in the trillions of dollars of capital every year. Now, when the $100 billion is not showing up, how will even more capital than that show up? Is a big question mark. And what should be the role of the multilaterals, for example, or the DFIs globally? Those are things that really need to be thought through, and we have to figure out ways in which more private investment can be catalyzed at relatively low cost into countries like India and other developing countries. So I think that's one very big area that India should continue to push for. The second is, uh, I think that this whole issue of loss and adaptation now, countries like India will suffer as a consequence of carbon emissions done by other countries in other parts of the world. So if there are impacts on the Indian economy or on India's people, how will the Western world compensate for that? I think that's going to be an important issue that has been tabled at this COP. And I don't know if they'll be able to get to resolution or not, but certainly I think that it's an important area that needs to be discussed. The third area really is around actually implementing all of these things. I don't think the Western world, frankly, is doing enough in terms of shifting to clean energy sources. The US has come out of the IRA that has to be implemented. We have to see how that goes. Europe is, of course, now struggling with the whole war situation and therefore trying to source energy from wherever they can. So, are they doing enough given the scale of their carbon emissions in the past? Is there reduction that they're now factoring in line with that? So, I think that's an area that India really should look at very, very carefully. And I would say last, of course, is the issue of how do we essentially get back onto the trajectory of as close to 1.5 degrees as possible, because we're not on that path right now.
Of course, lots more needs to be done, and implementation being the key here. I think on the positive, it's interesting that loss and damage has been included on the agenda this time. That's a first at a
Mhm.
COP meeting. So at least we have made a start somewhere. So long way to go, but let's see how that pans out.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, just before COP, you were one of the signatories for the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders open letter for world leaders for COP27. I mean, the letter very specifically talks about how the ambitious climate targets that we have can be realized only with the support of governments. Now, this, of course, has been an ongoing conversation about how much the governments need to support this cause. Very specifically, you did talk about the kind of initiatives India has taken, but as things change now and where we stand right now, what more can India do to contribute towards this cause?
So, as I said, of course, India is already doing a lot, right? I think the only couple of things that I could point to perhaps is speeding up of the distribution sector, which we've talked about, for years and years and years. Government has obviously put a lot of effort behind it, but the state governments are just not on the same page. So that whole issue needs to be tackled because, look, ultimately, it's the electricity sector that is the basis for decarbonizing the broader energy sector as well. As we get into electric vehicles and look at decarbonizing mobility and so on. So we do need the whole distribution piece to be sorted out. So that's clearly one issue that needs to be tackled. I think the second issue that the government will have to think very deeply about is that now, while we were encouraging green hydrogen in a big way, um, some of the policies, the final policies have not yet come out.
Right.
What's going to happen on the demand side, and is what they've done on the supply side adequate now, especially in light of what's happening in other parts of the world? Because every country in the world is now recognizing that green hydrogen is the future. And therefore, everybody is trying to develop that industry within their borders. The US with the IRA is giving almost $3 per kg benefit. Now, if India wants to be competitive, which I'm sure we do, then what do we need to do to make sure that our Indian industries are going to be competitive? So I think that's another big area that the government needs to think through and look out for. But I think beyond that, more or less everything else the government is doing, maybe we need faster auctions because we've been going at about 10 to 15 gigawatts every year for the last several years. We need to step that up to 30 to 40 gigawatts. So how do we make that step change happen is the other big question that the government has to think through. And I think the last thing is the issue of indigenizing the supply chain from importing solar modules, which I think is a very unhealthy dependence on China, to really getting the manufacturing going in India. So we need more capital to go into the PLI scheme, and India then has the real opportunity of emerging as an exporter beyond just servicing our own requirements. So there are quite a few things the government is already doing. Several things the government can do more to really, really turbocharge the sector even more and really, and have it emerge as one of the most important sectors of the Indian economy going forward.
The turbocharge being the keyword here, whether it's on discom issues or the green hydrogen policy. I mean, the industry is really waiting with bated breath, if I may say so, for the policy. And you, of course, your company has been an early mover in a lot of spaces. And I mean, renewable, of course, you have had a very interesting plan executed, but you're also looking at battery storage, you're also looking at green hydrogen. Right
Mhm.
now, given how the energy market is a little volatile, and like you said, that the pace of policy, of course, the turbocharging, as you say, is still something that the industry is looking for. How does your for renew power, how does the strategy pan out going ahead, and if at all you're tweaking it to kind of adapt to what's happening in the macro economy?
Well, Rachita, our core business is and will continue to be our renewable energy capacity addition in India to meet the demands of the Indian electricity sector. Currently, we have about 5.5 gigawatts of capacity that we're executing and will get done in the next 18 months. That's a lot. I mean, keep in mind that it took us almost the first 9 years of our existence to add that much capacity. Now we're going to be doing that in the next 18 months. So we really, in some ways, our own growth is being turbocharged by what's happening. So that's something that we're going to continue to focus on. The other thing we're looking at clearly, of course, is the area of um, green hydrogen. Both in India and outside India. Our sense is that hydrogen will be a globally traded commodity. So you have to go to locations which offer you the best cost base, and so you have to be mindful of that. And so that's really what we are doing. So I would say those are the couple of areas that we are really looking at. The other third area that, of course, we are looking at is getting backward integrated into manufacturing. We are setting up a 6 gigawatt module plant and a 2 gigawatt cell plant with a view to looking at what further is required to make sure that we have our dedicated supply of modules and cells. So that those are really the areas that we're working on right now, and we'll continue to focus on in the future as well.
Lots on your plate, and I'm sure it's an exciting space to be in. We are tracking COP27 very closely, and for those who are watching, please subscribe to the Money Control channel for more updates. We've been interviewing interesting people like Mr. Sinha to get an update on what's happening on the ground, and of course, we are carrying a lot of interviews and stories and analysis on the website as well. So do watch that. Do watch out for that. And Mr. Sinha, before we wrap up, I have to ask you, I mean, in terms of the climate action, of course, we have come a long way and there's a long way to go. But for somebody who is so deeply entrenched in the system, what do you think right now is the biggest challenge? What is it that perhaps gives you sleepless nights when it comes to climate action?
Deeply entrenched in which system, Rachita, I wonder. But anyway, moving on from that point, look, what I think the biggest issue is that I think people are not realizing that the effort required in adding thousands and thousands of megawatts of renewable energy, that's not a trivial issue. And we talk about financing and we talk about trillions of dollars of financing going into the sector, but where is that money going to go? It has to ultimately go into equipment which is not there, into land which is incredibly hard to source and get, into the power has to go to transmission lines which today don't exist for the most part. And people are not there to do all of this. So we need a lot of work actually in the entire renewable energy value chain to happen for us to meet all of the great targets that we need to meet. We don't have a choice. India's 450 gigawatt target for renewable energy by 2030, and then if you extend it forward, it'll be multiples of that if you add the green hydrogen requirements as well. How's This is not just India, this is a global issue. Who's going to do all of this, where the whole economy has to be created, and that creation, that physical work of doing all of this, that that bothers me, because there's just not enough work going on in that area, and I don't think enough people are focused on that. We need land, we need local permits, we need so many things to happen. So that execution is going to take a lot out of all of us, actually. But in a way, that's also there for the opportunity.
Opportunity, of course, and we'll have to just wait and watch. And of course, a lot of work is going on. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll, of course, speak to you from time to time to get perspective of on what's happening on the ground. Mrs. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us, and this was really insightful. And hope you have a good trip back home soon, and hope to see you in Bombay soon enough.
Great. Thank you, Rachita. Thank you for having
Thank
me on
you.
the.
Thank you. Bye
Yeah.
bye.